Hey, what's up everyone? So in this video, I want to show you how you can use the Agora RTC SDK with the Agora RTM SDK, or now known as signaling, together inside of your application to add in more functionality. So Agora RTM is an SDK provided by Agora that gives us the ability to transmit real-time data. So think of something like WebSockets where you can signal data back and forth between users in real time. And this is useful in applications where you're trying to add in real-time chat or just update something in real time within another user's browser, where we signal that data and transmit it back and forth. So the RTM SDK gives us that functionality, and we want to use this with the RTC SDK together to just enhance some of those features. And I want to talk about the limitations of our application right now and where it's going to help. So right now we have this voice calling app. For anybody that's not part of this series, we have a voice calling app where we simply enter a room and we see this user right here. We only see their UID and no username or anything like that. And we can enter this room and actually see other users within this room and communicate with each other. So the RTC SDK allows us to integrate voice and video. And with RTM, we want to fix this issue here where we only see a user's UID and we don't have any more information with that. So with RTM, we're actually able to add in user names and attach this information to these users and send that back and forth. When we want to add like a profile picture or an avatar, we can do that with Agora RTM. If we wanted to add in real-time chat, let's say we want a chat bar somewhere on the side here and send messages between users, RTM allows us to do all this stuff. So we're gonna use this for adding in display usernames, avatars here, and if we want to later on use this for like admin controls, let's say I created a room and people start speaking out of turn, I can mute them. Agora RTM can signal that data back and forth. So that's what we're gonna do here. We're gonna add in this functionality with or into our application, and let's just go ahead and go over the GitHub repo, and I kind of want to summarize how RTM works and how this is going to be integrated and where it compares to Agora RTC. So right now we are inside of number 4 here. So inside of our GitHub repo, this is linked up in the video description. We have number 4 in the series here, and this is that RTM RTC integration. And we want to open up the guide.md file, and let's kind of go over what we have here. So the Agora RTM is going to be downloaded a lot like the RTC SDK. We're going to have to run an npm install, and we also have to configure a client. And what I did here is I created a section that kind of compares the RTM methods to the RTC methods and what we're going to use to replace different methods inside of our application and how this looks. So with RTC, we created this client using the create client method. We had to pass in the mode, the codec, and so on. Well, with RTM, we're also going to create a client. We're going to just go ahead and call Agora RTM this time, and then we're going to call create instance, and we're going to use our app ID to create that instance. Now, to log in, we're going to go ahead and pass in our UID, which is going to be an RTM UID, and it has to be a string, and a token, which at this point is going to be null because we are using the app ID only method. So that's kind of the comparison. That's how you create a client. To join a channel with RTC, we just call join. We pass in our room ID, token, RTC UID, app ID, and that's how you join a specific room. Well, with RTM, we create a client and then we have to create a specific channel. So we're creating these rooms that we want to join, and we're just going to go ahead and join a specific room here. We're going to call create channel, and this room ID will actually be the same as the RTC room ID. So right now it's main, but later on when somebody enters a room name inside of a form, it's going to be that specific room name. It's just going to be a string, and that's how you do it. So you create the channel here. And then once we create the channel, we want to join it. So RTC, we just call join and that creates it for us. Well, with RTM, we have to create the channel and then join it. Now, as far as the event listeners, RTM has a lot of the same type of messages where when a user joins, we want to respond on the other side to let everybody know that a user has joined that channel. With RTC, we had this on user joined event listener. Well, with RTM, we have the equivalent of that, and that is going to be the on member joined. So very similar, we have an event listener to it, and that's how we respond, and we call it on the channel class instead of the client class. So to leave a channel with RTC, we just called the audio tracks, we stopped them, closed them, unpublished, and then left. With RTM here, we just simply call channel leave, and then we log out of our client. With the event listeners, we have the user left event with RTC. Well, with RTM, we just have the member left event listener. So we just call that, that's the equivalent of user left with RTM. So overall, inside of our application, we're actually going to have to rethink our approach. And what we're going to do is use RTM only for the voice calling part, But that part where we add users to a DOM and handle those events, we're going to let RTM take care of that because there is a lot more control we can add to it. So for example, when a user joins, we don't have much access or attributes to that user object. We only have a UID, maybe their audio or video data, but there's no way of actually sending that name. Well, with RTM, we can actually add in custom attributes to that specific user. And this is where we're going to add in a username, an avatar URL, and the other user on the other end can receive that data and then add that to their DOM. So we're going to have to rethink this approach, and I'm about to start coding, but we're just going to go ahead and actually comment out a lot of sections here. So I'll go line by line. We'll remove a few of these, and then we'll start rebuilding our application with RTM. So we're actually going to scale back a little bit, and then we'll start adding in these features. Okay, so let's jump into our code here. And before we start adding in the Agora RTM SDK, let's go ahead and start removing a few things and changing up our approach. So what I want to do is I want to get rid of anything that has to do with the actual DOM manipulation. So I want to make sure RTC is only taking care of anything to do with the audio signaling. Anything other than that, we want to get rid of. So inside of init RTC, we'll just go line by line. We first want to get rid of this element right here that we're appending to the DOM. So this user wrapper, we no longer need this, and instead of deleting it, I'm going to comment this out. So we're going to have RTC or RTM take care of that. As far as this volume indicator, we're going to leave this towards the end of this video or the next one, but for now I want to comment this out because we're going to redesign a few things, and this will actually mess a few things up if I leave it in. So the volume indicator we're going to comment out, but we will uncomment that later. And then if we scroll down, handle user joined, well, what does this function do here? So all it does is it listens for a user and when they joined, and it creates an element to append to the DOM, and that's it. Well, we're gonna have RTM do that. So this is gonna be taken care of by the RTM member joined method. So we're gonna uncomment that. We wanna go ahead and remove the corresponding event listener. So user joined, we no longer need that. So it's gonna be a little bit weird right now. We're just getting rid of things, so just kind of bear with me. We're just gonna redesign our approach here a little bit. So handle user publish, we subscribe to the audio track and then we play it. Well, that's totally fine. That's an RTC thing. We want to leave it. Handle user left. So when a user leaves, we want to delete their audio track from our audio tracks object there. So that's fine, but we don't want to remove it from the DOM. We want RTM to take care of that. So we'll just uncomment that section. So that's inside of handle user left. And we'll just keep scrolling down here. So let's see. Actually, what I'm going to do here is I'll just go back to the GitHub repo and see if I missed anything. So it should also be in here. So handle user joined. We took out the event listener, handle user left. We commented out the init volume indicator method, removed the current user, took care of that, and that should be it. Okay, so let's take a look at our application. So it shouldn't be broken. The only thing that should happen is we will still hear our user, but we won't actually see anything happen in the DOM. So if I enter a room, we see something still happening, so everything looks like it's working fine. We'll join with another user. Again, they will not see each other. So we'll open this up, we'll enter a room. So right now, if I want to start speaking, I can uncomment this or turn off the toggle mic functionality. So we'll toggle the mic and we can still hear the user, so everything's working fine. We're just not seeing the user in the actual DOM. Okay, so before we start with RTM, if you want to find the documentation, go to Agora.io or Agora.io. We'll go to developers. Here is the documentation and API reference. So we're going to find signaling. So it stands for real-time messaging, where previously was real-time messaging RTM. Now it's just signaling. So here's all the documentation. If you want to go to the API reference, go to web, and here you're going to see everything that you need for this. Okay, so that's the RTM documentation and SDK or API reference. So let's go ahead and add this in. So we'll close these tabs out. We'll go back to our app here and let's just see what our guide says here. So first we're going to install Agora RTM SDK. So let's go ahead and run that. And then we need to add in the Agora RTM class. That's going to be the entry point to the RTM SDK. So let's go ahead and do this. So we'll turn off our server real quick and we'll do npm install Agora RTM SDK. We'll run that install. So once we have that, we'll just run clear. We'll turn on our development server just to make sure it's running. Run dev. I don't know why it keeps scrolling for me. Okay, so our development server is on. We'll go back up here and we're just going to import the Agora RTM SDK. Okay, so let's jump back into our guide here. And the next thing we want to do is create a UID for our RTM user. So what's happening here is we have an RTC UID, and in theory, it would be nice if we can just have one UID for both users. But the problem here is that an RTC UID could in theory be a string, but this conflicts with other tools that Agora has. So let's say we wanted to use the cloud recording feature where we can record our audio or video calls, then a string UID wouldn't work there. So we just want to make sure the RTC UID is a integer, a 32-bit integer. And then for the RTM UID, we specifically want to make sure that this is a string. So we're just going to go ahead and change RTC to RTM here. So now we have two different UIDs, one for RTM and RTC. And then we're just going to use the same exact method, but we're just going to wrap this inside of the string function. And that way we make sure that one is a string and one is an integer. So it doesn't really matter that we have more than one UID here. So that should be fine. Now, if we go back to our guide, the next thing we want to do is go ahead and create our RTM client and channel. So we just want to go ahead and set those variables here. And I'm going to put this next to my RTC client. So we'll just go ahead and do let and then RTM client, if I can find those keys. And then we also need a channel. So we're just going to go ahead and initialize this. So if we follow the guide here, what we're going to do is go ahead and create a function called init RTM. And this function is going to be called when we join a room, just like the init RTC method. So we're going to go ahead and create the instance with Agora RTM create instance. We're going to log in, and then we're going to go ahead and create the channel. So let's see if I can remember all those as I'm typing. So we're just going to call init RTM, and we'll just make this an async function. And we're going to pass in a username later. So let's just go ahead and throw in the name value right there. And next we want to go ahead and take this RTM client value and set it. So this is going to be Agora RTM, and we're just going to call create instance. So create instance, and that should be RTM, not RTC. Looks like autofill is messing with me here. So create instance, and we're just going to go ahead and pass in the app ID. So create that client instance. We set this value right here for RTM. So we'll set the RTM client, and once we do that, we're just going to go ahead and log in with this client. So we'll call await here, and we'll get the RTM client that we just created, and we'll just call the login method. Now to log in, we need to pass in the UID, and this is going to be the RTC or RTM UID. And after that, we just need to pass in our token. So the token right now is going to be null. And again, it was very important in the beginning to use the app ID only authentication mechanism, because we would need a token specifically for our RTM client here too. So for now, we'll just pass in token. Unless you have that token already generated, that's why I would highly recommend setting that authentication mechanism. So we log in with a UID and a token. We use the same token as before. For now, it's just null. And let's continue here. So after we log in, we're going to go ahead and create the channel. So we want that channel class. We're going to create it with the RTM client. So RTM client, and we're going to call create channel. Now the channel name will just be the same room ID. So that way we can just keep that consistency, so we can reuse that. And then we want to go ahead and actually join this channel. So we'll call channel.join. Okay, so we create the client and we log in, we create the channel and we join. So we haven't added any functionality yet, but let's just go ahead and initialize this, and we'll make sure that this was all working. So if I bring this down here into enter room, when we submit that form, what we're going to do is just go ahead and call initiate RTM right after initiate RTC. So it's just going to be below it, and we do need to pass in a display name. So later on, we'll actually take this display name value, and we're going to grab it from the form. So we'll just go ahead and do like e.target.displayname.value, pass that in here, and then throw it into init RTM. But for now, it's just going to be an empty string. I just want to make sure we don't have any errors. Okay, so let's make sure everything's working. So we'll go back into our application. We'll hit enter. I don't see any errors, so it looks like it's all working good. And if I just go ahead and run a filter for RTM, looks like it's all working. And perfect. Okay, so it looks like we joined a channel. We see some events fire off, and let's just go ahead and work on those. So if we go back to our guide, let's see what we have next here. So when we join a channel with RTM, we also need to add in the leave channel functionality. Now with RTC, what happens is when you just close your window, let's say we just close our laptop, turn off our computer, by default, when we close that window, we automatically leave the channel because we stop streaming or broadcasting our audio or video. Now with RTM, it's not the same. You can actually leave a channel. Let's say you just close your window. Your user won't technically leave that channel actually. They'll be in there for about another 30 seconds until RTM logs them out on its own. So we want to go ahead and add in some functionality. One, to leave a channel when we click that exit button. And two, we want to listen for whenever our browser window just closes, and we want to make sure that user leaves, because if we rejoin right away with the same UID, that can add the same user into the channel multiple times. Okay, so we're going to create this leave RTM channel method here. So all we're going to do is call channel.leave and then RTM client.logout. And then we're just going to go ahead and make sure that this triggers when we click that leave button and unload, and on the window unload method. Okay, so leave RTM channel. We'll just bring this down here. So we already have this, let's see, what did I call it? Leave room method. So we'll just call this leave RTM channel. And we're just gonna make it an async function here. And let's just go ahead and call channel.leave. Let's see, channel.leave, yeah, that was correct. And then we're gonna call RTM client.logout. And just to be safe, I think I'm just gonna call await here. Let's just do await. I don't know if it has any impact on it, but we just wanna make sure that it's running. Okay. All right, so we leave the RTM channel. So that's all this method does. And what we're gonna do is go ahead and throw this into this method. So after we take care of everything here, let's go ahead and call leave channel. So this leave room button already gets triggered when we call that leave room icon. So we wanna leave the room. Now, the next thing we wanna do is make sure that we can actually trigger this when the window itself unloads. So right now, if I join a channel here, I can leave, and then that should all work. So let's actually check this out. Let's run a filter for RTM, and I want to make sure it gives me all that functionality. So if I enter a room, and then if I leave a room, it should, I don't know if it's supposed to console anything out yet, but it should be working. So with that, let's just go ahead and add in this same method right here. Let's trigger this on window unload. So we'll bring this into init RTM. And at the bottom of this method, let's go ahead and do window dot add event listener. So we're adding an event to the entire DOM, and we're just going to call before unload here. So before our window gets unloaded, let's just call the leave RTM channel method. Okay, let's just see if there's any errors, because I don't think that leave method is supposed to show anything in the console here necessarily. So we'll just go ahead and do leave, and there we go. And actually what I could probably do is test this with a remote user. So if I bring these users together here, let's put them side by side, the remote user should actually see when I'm leaving. So let's grab this right here, and if I can paste this into the browser, for some reason I can't select everything. Okay, so we'll refresh it, we'll enter the room, then we'll enter the room here, and it says some kind of member joined, and let's just go ahead and leave right now. So if I click the leave button, just bring this all the way over here. There we go. Now it says member left. Now check this out. So if I enter and then I just close the window without clicking that exit button, it should still catch that. So that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to make sure that if a user closes their window out without clicking leave, everything still works. And that's actually more common than not. I mean, when I leave a lot of voice calls or these Zoom meetings, or I probably shouldn't use the name Zoom, but when I leave these rooms, I typically just close my laptop, or I'll just click the X button within the browser and I'm good to go. So that's why we really need to consider that. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is actually talk about this handle member joined method. So we had this user join method within the RTC SDK, and we want to do this with RTM. So we're just going to go ahead and create this. So we're just going to go ahead and call handle member joined. So let's bring this down here. We have all our event listeners, and let's just go ahead and do this. So we're just going to go ahead and call handle member joined, and we'll make this an async function, and we can actually get the member ID here. So we're going to go ahead and pass that in. So when a member joins, just like with the handle member joined or handle user joined, or what do we call it? Yeah, handle user join method, we get access to like the user, the media type. Well, here we get access to that member ID, and we can actually use that member ID to get more information about a specific user. So when a user joins, what we want to do here is we actually want to trigger the response to this. So I'll finish up the function in a second, but we want to call the channel.onMemberJoined method. Okay, so we're going to bring this into init RTM. We'll just put this, let's see, I'll just bring this right here, called channel.onMemberJoined, and we're going to trigger the handle member joined method. So when a member joins, we just want to add that user to the DOM. So we want to be able to see that specific user. So let's finish up the method here. And what I'm going to do is actually just grab all the logic from the old handle user join method, and we're going to bring this down here into handle member joined. So let's go ahead and bring that in. I'm going to uncomment it. Let's make sure we can actually see everything, and let's just modify this. So when we create that user wrapper, we don't have access to this user UID anymore because we're having RTM take care of that, and we're going to have the RTM UID right here inside of member ID. So let's just modify this section. So we'll update that. The actual visual output, we're going to change that to the RTM UID. And in this section, I actually want to modify this a little bit. So we don't have access to the user UID just yet. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and put that in quotes, put in 3 hyphens there, and update this to user RTC UID. Now, we're going to fix this in a bit, but now we can actually identify this user with the RTM UID. Now, the reason why we had to comment out the initialization of this function here is because in here, we're actually querying the user by their specific volume UID, which is the RTC UID. Well, we don't have access to that just yet. It's a hyphen, so it would throw a bunch of errors. That's why we got rid of it. So let's actually update this to RTC. And then once we update that, we'll turn this method back on. So we're still going to get that RTC UID from this class here. Okay, so let's go ahead and check this out. So right now, when I join, I shouldn't see anything yet because we're only responding to remote users. So when I join, we don't have a way of seeing our own user, but when another user joins remotely, let's go ahead and just put this side by side. If we join here, we're going to see the user appear right here. Now, if we join with another user, we're going to see that user appear, and then this user is going to see the one after that. So we can only see new users that join. Now, what happens is when I leave, we don't have a way to remove that user from the DOM. So with RTC, we added this into the handle user left method, but with RTM, we're going to have another method take care of this, and this is going to be handle member left. So we'll just do let handle member left, and we'll go ahead and create this async function, pass in the member ID, finish up the function, and in here, we're just going to copy this code right here, throw that in right here, and now we're getting the member ID instead of the RTC UID. So we're just going to remove it, and then we need to add in the corresponding event listener. So we'll bring that in right here, and that's going to be inside of init RTM. We'll call channel.on and then member left, and we're just going to trigger handle member left. Okay, so we're just going to go a little slower here. Again, it's not adding too much functionality just yet. We're really nothing new. It's just going to give us more power later. So we'll bring this here, open them side by side. We're going to enter a room. We won't see anything. We'll enter here. Now we see this, and when we close this out, now the user leaves. The user can join. If we click X, everything's working. Awesome. Okay, so the next thing I want to do here is I want to explain a new concept here, and this is the fact that we don't see our own user when we join, or we don't see any users that were in there before us. So with RTM, we have access to this method called getChannelMembers, and we have the ability to on load find every single user in that channel and just receive every single member automatically. So it's called getMembers, and we're going to create a function called getChannelMembers, get all those members, iterate through them, and then render them and append them to the DOM. So if we look here, we're going to create this function called getChannelMembers, and we're actually able to call the channel class and just call getMembers. We'll loop through, and we'll add everything to the DOM. So let's go ahead and do this. Okay, so give me a second. Let me prep some notes here. And we're going to add this. Let's see. We can just go ahead and, you know what? Let's get rid of the old handle user join method. I don't need that. And we're going to get rid of the user wrapper, but make sure the init volume indicator method is still there. So we still want to be able to see that because we're going to use it. We're just going to uncomment it later. Let's get rid of this because the code is starting to get fairly messy. So I just want to get rid of that. Okay, So under handle member left, let's go ahead and create that function. We'll call this get channel members. Let's go ahead and do async. We'll want to use async await here. And let's go ahead and build this function out. Okay, so in this method, what we're going to do first is create a variable called members. So we want to get all the members, and we're going to go ahead and call await, call the channel class dot get members. So it's a very simple method. We're just calling get members, and that's it. So this will receive all the members for us. Then what we're going to do is we're going to loop through each member in this class. So we're going to create a for loop. So let I is equal to 0. We'll set that, and then we're going to iterate through. So while members dot length is, we're doing a loop the old school way. Length, why can't I spell length right now? Okay, so length is greater than I. We want to go ahead and iterate through this and then increment I. Okay, so we have our for loop here, and what we're going to do is go ahead and just create a new member wrapper. So I'm going to create this user wrapper. We'll bring this down here. So on each iteration, what we're going to do here is we're just going to go ahead and update the contents here. So user RTC, it's good. What we're going to do is go ahead and get members, and we specifically want to get that member ID. So we'll pass in I. So it's just going to be a list of integers, or not integers, but UIDs. And we'll just pass in members I right here. So we're just going to go ahead and get each member. And then what we want to do is just go ahead and append that member to the DOM. So we're going to grab this right here and bring this into our for loop. So we're just going to go ahead and go to the members wrapper and simply update that. So that is our user wrapper. Okay, so now to actually make this work, we're just going to go ahead and call get channel members, and I did members. I misspell that all the time. Here, let's actually fix this just so I don't have any errors later. Let's see if I spelled members right everywhere. Member, yeah, that looks good. Handle member left. Okay, so give me a second. Okay, so let's go ahead and call this right after we join. So we'll go down to, or up to, get channel members. We're going to get all the members, iterate through, and append them to the DOM. We'll bring this back up here inside of init RTM. So after we join, let's go ahead and call get members, because we just added our user to the DOM, or to that channel, and then we want to be able to render them. So if we join, we should see our member right there, so our user. Now if I go ahead and open up a new tab, and I'm going to join here with another user, now I see all the users before me, so now it's working the way it should. So as I go through each tab, we should see all the members. Now we can leave and update this. All right, everything is working good. So perfect. So we handled the leave, add, and get channel members method. And let's see what we have left here. So get channel members. And that was the last part in this series. So in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to jump to, I think it's displaying user names. So we just added in Agora RTM, and that was a little bit of work just to add in really no new functionality, but now we're prepared to actually add in certain attributes to our users, display their names, and then we'll go into avatars. So Agora RTM is going to give us all this logic. So we'll do that in the next video. I'll see you there.